Welcome to another edition of the Dakotan's Election Central, where we are continuing our coverage of the 2024 North Dakota election cycle. I'm Jonathan Starr, and today I am joined by a candidate in District 40 here in Minot, Alexandra Deufel. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about my campaign.
Absolutely. I hope I said your name right.
Well, my last name is pronounced Deufel, but
Joyful.
nobody ever knows that. I never get offended by it. You could probably hear from my accent. I was born and raised in Germany,
Okay,
so DEU is pronounced Deufel.
that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yep.
So you're born and raised in Germany. What brought you to the U.S.?
Well, that's kind of a long route. So I finished my all my high school in Germany and worked at the health insurance for 3 or 4 years and didn't really like that office work and had the opportunity to go to college. And
Okay.
so I ended up actually in Calgary in Alberta in Canada, did my undergraduate degree there in zoology and decided, wow, I really like university life and how can I stay forever at that life? And so I went to graduate school and that happened to be in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So Pennsylvania was how I ended up in the United States, and I became first an immigrant, and now I've been a citizen for quite a while, and I've been in Minot for about 22 years now,
And,
working at the Minot State University.
right, you're a professor there. What do you teach?
Yep. I'm a biologist, so I'm a scientist. I teach a lot of the vertebrate anatomy type courses, evolution, all that stuff.
A crazy story.
Yeah.
In the great year of 2020, with all the fun things that went on in that year, I sat in some of your classes.
Did you really?
I
Oh my
did.
goodness.
So there you go.
In 2020, I didn't recognize anybody because everybody had masks on. It was
Exactly.
terrible. It was terrible.
Right. It was. It was
Yeah.
crazy stuff. But that's not why we're talking today. You
Right.
made a decision to run for House in District 40. How did that come about?
Well, I've been always interested in politics here, state politics. And I've been down at the legislature testifying against some of the stuff that was going on there. Years ago, I started this, where I would go down there periodically if something came up that really got me animated. And I never felt I was heard there by Republicans in those committees. You were looked at like, who are you with your strange opinions? And I never felt I could achieve anything by talking to them. So I quit doing that. And so the opportunity arose that the Democrats asked me to run for District 40. And I said, somebody needs to step up and do this. I don't know how good I will be, but I'm passionate. I'm passionate about politics. And so I put my name in the hat, and here I am.
Here we are. And you bring up an interesting point because whether it's in the setting that you're talking about or just the everyday citizen, it feels like there is a consensus that people don't always feel like their voice is heard with our state legislatures in Bismarck. Do you feel like this is a problem? And if it is, if you feel like it is a problem, do you have ideas of how this could be better addressed?
Yes, I do believe it's a problem. That when you go down there, people don't really uh, address your concerns. They have their notion, they know how they feel about an issue, and they don't really want to hear the other side.
Right.
Now, I'm really animated by the reproductive rights things, of course, as a biologist. The last time I went down there was arguing against the ban on abortions for fetal abnormalities, which I think is simply cruel.
Okay.
And there was just absolutely no sense that anybody would listen to you at all.
Right.
But also, in general, in issues, when you email legislators, they say, well, I don't feel like that. Thank you for your opinion. And that's
Yeah.
about what you get.
Right.
And I'm really concerned lately at the efforts that happened trying to make bringing measures more and more difficult. So
Mhm.
far, that's kind of failed. But I'm really concerned that hearing things like, well, we should make the threshold higher? How many signatures do you need? How many do you have to have more than 60% vote on an issue? Do we have the legislators then look at it afterwards and decide, well, no, we can't accept that? So you get the sense that they feel like they're our parents. They know what's good for the state. They know what's good for us. And, how we feel about it as the constituents doesn't seem to concern them too much.
Right.
So I think there needs to be more balance in Bismarck so that they don't feel like they're invulnerable. And
Absolutely.
I certainly feel right now the Republicans in Bismarck feel people vote for us. We have an R behind our name. That's all we need to do. We don't have to go out to campaign. As long as we're Republicans, we get elected. And then you get things like this where they really don't respond to their constituents anymore.
Right. Yeah. It's an interesting thing with the infighting that's going on in the Republican Party,
Hmm.
because that's they're starting. Some of the people that have been there for a while are starting to feel heat and the term limits, which is going to be very interesting to see how that plays out in a couple years. One of the things that you've mentioned is that when you first moved to North Dakota, it was a live and let live place.
Absolutely.
With personal freedom. And now that you feel like that's changing, can you describe a little bit how you feel like that has changed in the last 2 decades?
Well, all of this social stuff, telling me what to read, telling me what medical decisions, not just the abortion, but the
Yeah,
transgender stuff. I mean, how many transgender people do we have in North Dakota? Is that really a huge issue?
right.
Right? So these things get built up much bigger in my mind than they should be. And they spend all their time on that. And if I have a pregnancy issue, some pregnancy complications, and legislators who are not doctors are deciding, wow, you have to be this sick before we let you have an abortion, I have
Yeah.
a problem with that. And I don't call that freedom, and I don't call that small government in any way,
Mhm.
shape, or form. So this hyper focus on forcing these really difficult personal issues into the legislature and telling us how we should deal with those, that's a problem. And that's not freedom in my mind.
Absolutely. So, with that being said, I think later in our conversation, we'll talk a little bit about abortion specifically. It might be sooner
Sure.
than I think. But what I want to talk about right now is what are just name three. I know on your website you have several, but name your top three priorities for running for House in District 40.
I think just standing against the anti abortion stuff, if there's more coming down the pipe, I would definitely not put it past anyone down there to try now to make it tougher to get birth control, which
Hmm.
is also really not making abortion smaller. So any
Right.
of that type of stuff. But if we get away from the social things, I think sustainability in ranching, make more grants available for ranchers who want to go to the rotational grazing, those types of things. Climate change is an issue. As a scientist, of course, I can read that data and agree with, yes, we have an issue with that and it's human caused. So what can we do with it that is not hurting people? And so some of the ranching practices that are already being adopted by a lot of ranchers, we can push that a little bit more in the state. Um, I would say in all of the above energy policy, we
Okay.
don't need to just focus on oil. Oil is not going to go away. Nobody is saying it will go away. Nobody is saying we need to get rid of oil altogether. There's always going to be a demand for oil, but that doesn't mean we can't also look at the other. And we're seeing a lot of wind development, and landowners are pro wind development. Um, so we can do it all. We don't need to be one or the other.
Right. This is one that you didn't mention, and we're gonna go. I've written down the ones you mentioned, and we're gonna go through those. But I think an interesting one that is top of mind to a lot of families is your focus on increased access to affordable childcare. I know in the Minot area, this is a huge problem.
It's
Um,
huge.
I had a friend the other day say that their daycare fell through. I saw something the other day, that somebody, what, 20 minutes before their shift, they found out that they no longer had daycare going forward. It wasn't just someone called in sick; it's their daycare solution shut down. Um, this is a very consistent problem. What are some of the solutions that might come for daycare and
Yeah,
childcare?
I only see the solution to that to make it easier to pay people that work at these daycares. That's a hard job. I only had one child, and
Hmm.
I can't imagine dealing with a whole room full of toddlers on a minimum wage.
Right.
So that's difficult, and it's similar really in our elder care. So we need to make money available, grant money to support wages for these people. We're tight. We have a tight labor market, and competing for those kind of jobs to get people working there, and you want quality people
Right.
to work in daycares. So I see the only solution really is supporting daycare centers, and I think that would be easier in a way than trying to support the parents directly with money. Of course, that would be another way, grants to parents, income based, of course,
Right.
not across the board. But the prices are so high. I mean, this is one of the reasons why people can't have kids, or they go to unlicensed caregivers where you don't know what you're getting. We've had
Very
some
dangerous.
bad situations sometimes with unlicensed daycares.
Absolutely, we have. Yeah, definitely a problem. Definitely, I like the idea of. I think sometimes you have to be careful giving the grants or however it would happen to the parents, unless that there's definite control on it. Probably.
Hmm.
How do you see
Yeah.
that playing out?
Yeah, that's the problem, that it always costs something, right?
Yeah.
If you make, we saw that with our $500 rebate on our property taxes,
Right.
right? That was across the board. Everybody gets the $500 pretty much, and then you don't have to build that infrastructure to regulate and have people prove if their income
Right.
actually warrants getting that relief.
Yep.
So anything like that, of course, yes, you have to do the math. Well,
Yep.
if we give it to everybody across the board, which seems to be, people are more open to that in North Dakota.
Yeah. Yeah.
They seem to be more open to, well, I just give everybody $500, rich and poor alike. Whereas I come from a country where it's more of a social based system, where, but then you need the infrastructure to regulate that. You
Right.
know, you have to have parents send in, well, here's my tax statement from last year,
Yep.
or income based, and that costs money. You have to hire people to look at those statements, and that's definitely a trade off, because that's then dollars you can't give the parents themselves.
Absolutely. So a couple other issues that you mentioned is one. We'll start off with abortion. What what is the solution for abortion in North Dakota?
I think we need to have this entirely be up to people. Um, I'm of the mind that, I mean, I know too much about what can go wrong. I know
Right.
people always talk about abortion as if it's only people were not careful having
Right. It's a
sex,
form of
and then
child
they're
care
using it as some kind of birth
control.
control.
Right. Form of
This
birth
is
control.
usually not really the biggest proportion of abortion.
Mhm.
Abortion happens for all kinds of reasons, and we cannot legislate every little bit. Even when you say, well, the exemption's incest. Well, how do you prove that? By the
Right.
time you prove that, the child is traumatized to such a degree. I think politicians need to get out of the whole thing. Rape, the same thing. Trying to
Mhm.
prove rape,
Right.
try to prove that. It's a he said, she said situation a lot of times. Um, People are not being believed. Uh, so I think it's just, even with health of the mother. Well, how sick do you have to be? Hospitals in some of these states are having to get lawyers involved
Right.
to decide. The hospital lawyer decides, well, are you septic enough? Is your temperature high enough that we could say, well, your life is in danger?
Mhm.
It's just not workable. People die, women die,
Yeah.
and then the entire poverty angle to it. Of course, you know, if you want to get into that aspect of it, are you really pro-life if you're only anti-abortion?
Yeah. So should there be a 16 or 20-week limit, like you can have an abortion up to that term, or should it be should there be any limits as far as that's concerned?
I think what we had before Roe fell, viability is reasonable
Okay.
cutoff for me, simply because no one suddenly decides, oh, I'm 22 weeks along, I don't want to have this baby after all.
Hmm.
Those are the 22-week abortions, the 24-week abortions. Well, I guess it didn't never went to 24 weeks, but let's say 22 weeks. That's 2 weeks after you find out on your anatomy scan that your baby has anencephaly or
Okay.
Edwards syndrome or Patau syndrome,
Hmm.
but it gets portrayed as if it's some really cavalier approach.
Hmm.
And these people are sad, and they should have the opportunity, if they are going to have a baby without a brain, to choose abortion if that's what they want. Um, and no, keep in mind, nobody forces anybody to have that abortion.
Right.
I know somebody in my circle. They had a serious genetic abnormality, not viable, and they chose to have that baby. You can do that,
Hmm.
and the baby lived a week or two, and that can be agonizing to watch. But if you choose to do that, you can do that.
Absolutely.
Um, so I would definitely say viability, because you can't legislate every little instance.
Right. That makes sense. And so then we'll move to ranching practices and
Hmm.
climate change. And those, it sounds like those two kind of flow together a little bit in where you're coming from. Um, well, let's talk about the climate change portion of it, though. What needs to be regulated in order to help prevent the climate change that's happening in North Dakota?
In North Dakota, I see a huge possibility for expanding wind, of course.
Yeah.
Solar, maybe. The transmission line issues, of course, always that's a national problem. It's too difficult to build in the United States because of too many regulations, really, in some way. Um, but we can do so much with ranching in particular, because we have basically, we used to have a native grassland.
Okay.
And when we went to subdivide the grassland into smaller plots and started keeping cows on one section and haying the other section, that extracts a tremendous amount of biomatter that could stay in the ground.
Okay.
And so if you can go to rotational grazing, where you move your cattle from one plot to another, they eat the grass down. They're depositing their their poop, basically, that goes back into the soil, and then you move them on, and you hay less of it. Then that is a tremendous benefit. The prairie ecosystem can suck up a tremendous amount of carbon, but we can't degrade the soil. So if we have the soil as a healthy soil, where we don't have the cattle on the same pasture year round, if you can do that as a rancher, if you have the land, that is really beneficial overall. And if you tie that to carbon credits, which we don't really have yet completely, but
Yeah.
that is part of the conservation that we can do here. That really, I think ranchers that are moving that way are surprised how well their cattle do with those new approaches.
Very interesting. So we're going to take a step back from the priorities that we've been talking about, and we're going to jump into a rapid fire round that we've been doing here on the Election Central, where we're going to ask you a bunch of random questions, and you get
All
to
right.
give us your random answer, and it's supposed to be kind of a fun time. So here we go. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
I'm a terrible early bird. I'm too old to stay up at night. I've crested into that terrible population who can't watch a movie past 10.
That's funny. So are you a book or movie person?
Both.
Okay,
Probably more movies nowadays.
interesting. Android or iPhone?
iPhone.
Good, good. That I feel like people should support you just because of that. Pizza or burgers?
Oh, that's tough. I love both.
Okay, how about this? What's your favorite restaurant in North Dakota?
The favorite restaurant in North right now in Minot, it's actually Olive Garden, believe it or not.
Hey, there you go. That's a that's a good move. Um, do you enjoy board games or perhaps video games?
Neither, I
Either.
know.
Hey,
I
you
just people have to tell me rules and games every time they want me to play. I just my mind doesn't pick that up.
I don't enjoy playing
And
mini games either.
yeah,
Online shopping or in-store shopping?
in store if I can.
Yeah, that's the move. Podcasts or audiobooks?
Podcast.
Okay. Um, if you could go to a getaway, would it be a nice mountain getaway or would it be going and enjoying some time at the lake?
Oh, that's tough. I live on a little hobby farm, so my
Mm,
getaways are to cities at this point.
makes sense.
So I'm not going rural. I'm going to a city to
Sure.
take in a museum,
Yeah.
that type of thing.
Okay.
I
So
have horses, so I don't get out much. So
I'll ask this one then. Do you enjoy city life or country life better?
I love the country,
Yes.
and I get enough city life if I go to a conference. I
Good enough.
spend 3 or 4 days in the city. I can't take the traffic anymore in cities.
Yeah, for sure. That
Yeah.
even we're getting to the point where traffic's bad in Minot too
It
because
is. It is. I say to my husband, "Gosh, I had to wait two lights, you know." And
the
it's living in
truth.
Minot for 22 years that
Yes,
gets you happy about not having traffic. 10 minutes to work.
right. Um, last two questions. Homemade meal or restaurant?
Restaurant.
And then what's the best thing or part of North Dakota?
Oh, the wide open spaces, just the
Yeah,
sky, and the temperature. Believe it or not,
right.
I don't like muggy, warm, humid weather at all. And I
Absolutely.
like seasons, and I prefer winter over having like Florida type of weather.
Okay, so that's interesting. And
Yeah,
what's interesting to me is when I talk with people on these podcasts, they mention that they enjoy the four seasons in North Dakota.
yeah,
And I think that's sometimes overlooked because typically, if you talk to a North Dakotan, it is summer and winter. It's two
hmm
seasons. But last year we had a beautiful fall. It
hmm
was the most beautiful fall I've seen since I've been here. And North Dakota does have more beauty than what people give it credit for sometimes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love it here.
All right, so we're coming towards the end of this, but I have a couple of questions left I want to ask you. And first is this, and we've asked people from either party this question. I think it's an interesting question. Um, it's an elementary question though. What makes you a Democrat?
Generally, just overall, I agree with their policies more.
Yeah,
And since we only have a two-party system, that's where I end up.
right,
Um, I'm kind of a social libertarian, which is Democratic more than Republican.
right.
And growing up in Germany, I'm not afraid of social programs, which makes me more of a Democrat than a Republican. So generally, I feel more at home. Although in the Democratic Party, although I feel like they've made huge mistakes with abandoning rural America.
Yeah,
But I'm not going to run as an independent
right, right,
because overall, I believe you just pick the best of what you have. You can't expect everything to be perfect.
right. No, I think it's good that somebody has a moral base that they make that decision off of rather than just being, well, this is what I'm supposed to be, so I'm just going to try to fit in with the
Yeah,
crowd.
yeah,
I think that's important. Obviously, June 11th is primary day. That's a big day. You're running an uncontested primary,
right.
from what I've seen, but it's still a big day for you as people need to get out and support. And then you have obviously the general election, which will be a big day as well. But as those days approach, why should someone vote for you?
Just simply if they want change in Bismarck, if they want some balance. I'm no extremist. I'm willing to work with people, but I just feel because there's a supermajority down there, it's gone off the rails. It's just too extreme and no willingness to actually work. And it's really changed. It wasn't like that when I got here. It
Right.
really wasn't like that. Republicans were Republicans. They had their economic issues. They were generally conservative, but they were not like they are now. And this whole drive to more and more MAGA type people down there, really regular Republicans are being pushed out. We see that with Lisa Olson in Minot.
Hmm.
She's a reasonable person, and she helped a Democrat find a polling station or something on Facebook years ago, and they saw that and don't want her to run as a Republican.
Right.
That has to change. So I think we need balance there, and
Absolutely. I think the history of the North Dakota politics is interesting. Um, Obviously, I think the last Democrat at the like federal level for North Dakota was Heidi Heitkamp.
mhm.
Um, and but if you look before that, there was a lot of Democrats that were in those offices and even in the state offices as well. It took a long time for there to be even a Republican governor in North
Mhm.
Dakota. Again, after a lot of Democrats, what does it take for the Democrats to start getting some of those key spots? Is this a cycle with all the infighting that's on in the Republican Party? Is this a cycle where Democrats are able to make ground back?
I'm hoping that people are finally getting fed up with the extremism. I think Democrats really need to do more to actually counter some of this talk that's all national. So all these issues are coming top down from the national level, right?
Mm.
Alec, the legislative exchange,
Yep.
uh, these conservative groups have gotten really, really good at getting their issues into the states, and the Democrats have not.
Absolutely.
So I think we need to, as Democrats, really come out and actually talk about this stuff. I've been thinking the last few years, Democrats have really been hiding that th're Democrats. So this sort of Republican light approach, which I don't think is working,
Mhm.
um, and the National Democrats coming down with sort of this elitist message. I mean, Hillary Clinton was a prime example of that. That kind of message turns people off.
Right.
When you have somebody come from a big city who really doesn't know what matters here. So we need to stop that, and we need to come out actually as North Dakota Democrats and talk to people. This state really has quite the socialist history, really, when you think about it. The reason we have a state bank is because of socialism in the early 1900s when the farmers were upset about their markets in Minneapolis,
Right.
the origin of the NPL, the Nonpartisan League. And the reason we have small banks, local credit unions, is because we have the Bank of North Dakota backing them. So you can't just always say, oh, I don't like socialism. There's a lot of socialism in North Dakota history that did a lot of good for farmers here. And I
Absolutely.
believe that that used to be why we had an entirely Democratic delegation when I moved to North Dakota, because people liked the Farm Bill
Right.
and
They do.
the Democratic support for farmers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy because 22 years ago, it doesn't take long for things to change dramatically. That's something people should be aware of. Like,
Right.
it's not you don't have to wait a whole generation for change. It can happen very quickly. Well, I appreciate you coming on today. If someone wanted to support you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
They could go to my Facebook page or website if they search for my name, Alexandra Deufel. That should pull up. And there's a button there if you want to donate. Please do, so I can do some radio ads and get my message out there. And I hope for your support, really, just for change. I mean, just think about like there won't be a Democrat supermajority down there, right? So you don't have to be afraid as a voter to vote for me or any of the others running, but we would be able to just say, wait a minute, is this really what's important for North Dakota?
Right.
What you're trying to push here?
Very good. Well, thank you very much. This has been another episode of the Dakotans Election Central, where we are continuing our coverage of the 2024 North Dakota election cycle. I'm Jonathan Starr. Be sure to go to mydakotan.com, click Election Central. There you'll be able to see other interviews just like the one you just watched. Like and follow us on Facebook. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Become part of the Dakotan community. We're here for you. Thank you and have a great day.